Hello, and welcome to another edition of TJ Plays with some A2UI. So, in this video, I thought I'd cover something that's been generating a little bit of buzz right now, both in the AI community and the design systems community, and it's called A2UI. And in this video, I hope to break it down into easily digestible sections, just so that way you kind of understand completely what it is, both from like a designer standpoint, from a infrastructure standpoint, from a user's standpoint who's interacting with it. And then I want to call out some differences between some of the types of code generators and ways these components and layouts are generated versus what this actually is. Because I know there's a lot of confusion behind, or at least I'm hearing a lot of confusion around what exactly is A2UI. So I think where I'll start is so like the concept is like, what if a AI agent could build real user interfaces, not mock-ups or code snippets, but like real actual working components from your design system on demand as part of a conversation or an interaction. And this is in your production application. This isn't like a developer support tool or something like that. So in a nutshell, that's what A2UI enables. And we feel really strongly about it only because we've already started to begin implementing this kind of like in a beta version of some of the projects that we're currently working in. So we felt the need to kind of show you some of the work that we've been doing with it and then explain to you the importance of it and then where we think it's headed in the future. So just to address what we think the current problem is with AI UI generation is that currently right now when AI agents need to show something more than just text, they usually resort to two or three poor options or bad options. First, they can generate code using Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever. It writes your React. You can copy and paste that React into your code base. If it has access to your code base, then it writes it directly to your code base. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But this is the key distinction. It can't run arbitrary generated code in production. One, it's not something that you want to do, but two, you need to test that, the security issues. There's lots of different reasons why you wouldn't want that to happen. People talk about, the issues with risky AI generations and hallucinations and just the fidelity of component generations and just code generation in general from AI. So that's probably not something that we want to do in production, just letting AI run amok in your production environment. So one of the second things is they can describe what to build. So like create a form with 3 fields and a submit button. Cool. Now you kind of need somebody to go and hook it up to stuff. You need a developer to implement it. It needs to hook to an API. It needs to be integrated within a CMS or whatever the use case is for that component structure. Another issue is they can use pre-built widgets, but they're limited to whatever widget someone anticipates you need. So there's really no flexibility. So it's a predefined layout, so to speak. So that it's like if you're using tools to generate your landing page or your home page, they'll always be your landing page or your home page. You can edit them and republish them, and maybe you can drag and drop some things around, but that requires a developer or an editor to go in and make those edits. So it's limited flexibility. A2UI is mainly looking to solve this problem. A2UI solves this by separating what the agent wants to show from how your application renders it. So I'll get into a little diagram here. So this is the A2UI official documentation site from Google. And this is like a little bit of a behind the scenes look into what exactly it does. The key insight is that A2UI is a declarative protocol. The AI doesn't generate the code. It generates a recipe that lines up to the code. So it's a structured JSON description of what UI elements should appear and how they're arranged and the data they display. So your application then renders that recipe using your own components. You type whatever it is, type a message or interact with a button or something somewhere. And then there's an AI agent that communicates with the language model that then generates the JSON, which is the recipe. And then that recipe is hooked to your component, your web application that serves your component library, your design system. It then serves up those components to the user's UI, so the user interface that the user's interacting with based on whatever their interaction was, whatever the intention was of that user. So why does this matter now? This matters because when we're moving forward into a world where AI agents handle more complex tasks, and this isn't something that's going to be utilized in this isn't probably something meant for marketing websites or maybe at some point they will. But this is mainly meant for UI heavy workflows that have a lot of widgets and dashboards and forms and mostly enterprise use cases. I think in the beginning is probably what this would likely be used for. But right now, the way that a lot of this back and forth happens is through chat bubbles, basically. Like we've all used Chat and Claude and all these other language model platforms. And it's a very much a back and forth repetitious cycle of you ask a thing or you say a thing, it responds with the thing, and then so on and so on and so on. So imagine an enterprise agent that can generate approval workflows or data visualizations or custom forms based on conversation context, or a customer service agent that can show product comparisons or booking interfaces or account management screens without any pre-built templates. So when Google released this A2UI as an open protocol, because this is the future that they see coming. So when you ask things like some of the examples that they supplied here, it's like book a table for two. The user doesn't understand components or understands forms or what exactly they want to display. They're not explicitly describing what they need in order for them to book a table for two. They're saying book a table for two, and the agent is generating a recipe that is lining up to components or component structures that have already been predefined within your design system, and then delivers a date field, a username field to log in potentially, and how many seats or how many people your reservation. So that's kind of an example of how that works. And I think one of the biggest distinctions that is important to make here is that these are different. Like this is a protocol for one, so it isn't like an application that you're downloading. A2UI is like HTML. There's a confined set of constraints around the way these recipes are built. It's not like something like Lovable or V0 or Bolt. Tools like Lovable or V0, those already generate full applications from natural language. But the big distinction here, those are meant for developers or designers who are looking to dabble into code generation or application generation. They generate code that developer reviews that typically a developer would review and deploy before going live. And then once it's live, it's there. It's great for prototyping, but they're not running that output directly in a production environment, especially without someone taking a look at it. A2UI is different because it's a runtime protocol. That AI generates a recipe, your application renders it using your pre-approved components, and real users see the results, all without a developer in the loop. So this is happening live in your application. This isn't something that's pre-built and then shipped or deployed to an application. So it's different between AI helps me build an app and AI shows users an interface during a conversation. Both are valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think they're both amazing pieces of technology. They're just different layers in the stack. So I hope that helps create the distinction there. So let me show you a little bit about what A2UI actually looks like. So I can use the documentation site just to kind of give you the anatomy of A2UI and what the quote unquote recipe looks like. And this is basically what it is. So the AI is generating this recipe. So first, it generates an ID. So this is the main ID. This is kind of like establishing the global ID of the UI that it's about to generate. And then it is grabbing some identification, identification markers that are syncing to components that exist within your design system, and then it's filling those with the components, and then any of the properties that live within those components. So it's putting in the values like book your table. It's saying grab the ID of date picker is going to pull the date time picker, date time input, and then the values that need to be filled in are these. And then so there's other key value pairs that it pulls through, but this is a fairly simple example of what this might look like for the restaurant reservation book a table for two example. And we'll get into a little bit more of the detail stuff. I don't want to get bogged down on the code side of it too much. But what's important to understand is that it is some sort of user input, whether it's an event that happens that engages your agent, your AI, to generate the recipe based on A2UI's predefined guidelines. And then it's up to your design system and how well your design system has been defined to determine the return, the output, what comes back from the recipe that the AI has generated. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we talk about why it's such an important piece of technology right now and how this ties in with design systems is that now more than ever is it important to increase the fidelity of your design systems to ensure that you've got documentation on point, that you've got full coverage of all your components and component structures. Because once these recipes are created, these are the recipes that are going to be looking for components that should exist within your design system and line them up so that way it can create these compositions in order to fulfill the user's intent. If it doesn't find a certain component, your AI will either move on to whatever the next best thing is, or it'll fail safely and it won't error out or anything, depending on how your application works with it. So we've been doing some work with this for a little bit. I can show you a couple of examples of some things that exist out there. For one, this is the A2UI. It's a public repository. You can play with it. There's some demos in here that you can mess around with. The demos are mainly Angular in web components with lit. I think in the future there are some, they're looking to add React, Vue, and some other JavaScript libraries and frameworks to it. But as of right now, you can clone this and play with some of the examples that they have in there. They're good to play with. And this is the official blog post where they're introducing A2UI. It's a good read. It does a really good job distilling some of the stuff that I just mentioned, talking about the main problems and how agents need to speak to UI, not have this clunky back and forth that happens with I want to book a table for two. Okay, what day? I want that tomorrow. Okay, what time? Maybe 7 p.m. Oh, we don't have anything for that. What other times? So there's a lot of back and forth of that. Why not just present the user with a form and then allow them to do the interactive parts themselves? One cool little tool that I wanted to call out was this neat A2UI composer. So you can there's a gallery of things that you can actually pull from in here. So there's all these little card components and then reasons why all these are created. But then there's this create part. So you can say something like, I need to book a flight from New Orleans, Louisiana to New York on March 15th, 2026. And then I can create this. And this is a fun little tool. This is powered by Copilot Kit, which is like a partner of A2UI. They have a site here that does a really good job of outlining some of the specs. And then it does a pretty deep dive into what exactly A2UI is and offers some examples and demos and other fun stuff. So I'll link all of these in a resources post, and I'll post it along with this message. As you can see right here, this is a live example of something that I posted. This is a flight booking. This has the place where I said the origin should be, and this has the destination of where I'm looking to go. It knew that I needed some sort of date picker, and then with the book flight options. This is a little primitive. It's not exactly like the most aesthetic thing. And then over here, it shows you the recipe or the spec that the A2UI spec that was created. And then over here is the chat interface that it heard from my input and then how it ended up generating this. And then if you wanted to apply this to your application, you can copy the JSON or you can download it specifically and then add it if this is something that you're looking to do. We have a similar tool that we've been working on. Like I said, we've had some projects that have called for this type of technology, mainly for a lot of security reasons, and then just for ensuring that there isn't any sort of derailment of the AI when it's generating these components. So we ended up creating this thing called A2UI Bridge. I'll show you in a second about what it is. This is very similar to the A2UI Composer from the Copilot Kit folks. This one's ours. So I did the same thing here. It's a chat interface. I'm trying to book a flight from New Orleans airport to New York JFK on March 26, 2026. And then I have right now, A2UI's demo is only limited to, like I said before, web components with Lit and Angular. I believe it's using Material. And in our projects, we were mainly working with ShadCN or Mantine as our design systems. So we needed to create this bridge to do something similar to what's in the A2UI GitHub repository to work with React, which isn't something that's currently supported. So we needed to figure out a way to get that bridge connected and actually have it supported. So that's what this is here. It's fairly simple and straightforward. I did the same thing here with this conversation chat. I said, book me a flight. This is what it rendered. And then you have the option of going back and forth between ShadCN and Mantine. And as you can see, it'll put the actual airports in there for New York. And then there's the date time picker. And then you could select your seats and all that kind of stuff. And there's other ones. There's these predefined scenarios. If you ever wanted to use any of these, you could doctor's visit. So these are the predefined scenarios. You don't have to go by any of the ones that are in here. You can go with just whatever you want to do. So you can say like, I want to book a table for 2 at my local Chinese food restaurant, and then it would render that for you. So here's what it generated. And this is like pretty spot on for what you're looking for. So imagine a world where you're working within an application, instead of the response that you get from your language model provider or whatever language model you're working with, you're getting the actual tool or interface that is needed in order for you to complete the thought or finish the action or whatever it is that you're communicating with AI in the first place. So I'll post this along our resources. This gives a full explanation of exactly what it does and what it is, and probably does a better job of explaining what A2UI Bridge is. It does have Mantine and ShadCN adapter in it. So if you didn't want to write your own recipes, it comes with recipes that are aligned with the properties from those design systems. So you would just be able to hook this up and it should work right away. If you don't have that, then you'd want to install the A2UI Bridge, and then you'd want to start creating your own adapters. So that way your A2UI knows how to generate. Basically, you're creating the guidelines for the recipes that A2UI would be generating, or your language model would be generating based on the A2UI spec. Anyway, that was a lot. There's another piece that I want to get into at some point where we have this fun playground where we get into these experiments and a lot of documentation and just some really interesting stuff that we've been doing with A2UI. This is all publicly accessible stuff, and I'll be sharing all of this. This is our A2UI lab where you can really get into like some really like deep areas of A2UI and how it's being used and how it renders and what's happening on the back end. This is a little technical for this conversation, and this is already a pretty lengthy demo. So I'll leave it right there and say, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. This is something that's near and dear to us only because we've been kind of consumed with it over the last couple of weeks. And yeah, so I hope you have a moment to look into it. And like I said, if you ever looking to get a little bit more information about this, or curious about what we're doing with it, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks a lot, everybody.